Before we begin, I'm sure the whole House will wish to join me in remembering the life and service of His Holiness Pope Francis. He was both a humble man, a charismatic leader, who was unafraid to confront some of the greatest challenges facing the world. He will be deeply missed by those of all faiths around the world, and in particular our thoughts with the members of the Roman Catholic community throughout our constituencies and across the United Kingdom as they mourn his passing. Right, let us start with questions Secretary of State for Justice, Dr Alison Gardner.
Question number 1, please, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
With permission, Mr Speaker, I will answer question 1 and 8 together. This government's plan to support women is clear and ambitious. The aim is to reduce the number of women going to prison. Our Women's Justice Board will lead on this, and following Susanna Hancock's review published in March, this government has acted to prevent girls being held in young offender institutions.
Dr Alison.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I've been very concerned to hear first-hand reports of female prisoners being handcuffed during childbirth, sometimes to male officers. Would the Minister agree with me that there should be an independent investigation into the use of birth cuffing in women's prisons across the country, which consults all women who have been or may be affected?
Minister.
My honourable friend refers to a shocking situation. our core funding to youth offending teams across the country, allowing them to support children away from crime.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Constituents across my community of Loughborough, Shepshed and the villages have been under the scourge of off-road bikes, often upon young re-offenders. It's a havoc for residents, it's dangerous for pedestrians and can be fatal for those who are on those bikes. And for those young re-offenders often have little else to do with little education, training or employment opportunities. So can the Minister please set out how we're going to end the scourge of off-road bikes and re-offending, and how this government will once again be tough on crime and tough on the causes of crime?
Minister.
My honourable friend is exactly right. Antisocial behaviour has been too easily dismissed in the past as low level. It can cause real distress and misery to our communities, as he rightly describes. I'm pleased that the new Crime and Policing Bill includes measures to enhance police powers to seize nuisance off-road bikes and other vehicles used in an antisocial manner.
Catherine Atkinson.
Engineered Learning in Derby teaches welding skills to young people at risk of offending and re-offending. A qualified, experienced welder can earn more than £50,000, but we have a national shortage of welders. Would the Minister agree that preventing re-offending and securing the skills our country needs is a win-win? And would they look at how we can get more young lives back on track, learning trades like these?
Minister.
My honourable friend is exactly right. It's a clear win-win with the engineered learning is doing with teaching welding skills and moving people away from crime. The department will continue to fund youth offending teams to work with local education and employment providers to help young people get the skills they need to have productive careers and positive lives.
Peter Bell.
Aspiration and ambition are drivers of social mobility and help to reduce deprivation and crime. What discussions has the Minister had with the Department of Education to increase apprenticeships and training so that these opportunities can be extended to all and we can reduce young offending throughout the UK?
Minister.
We have regular discussions with the Department for Education on these matters, and he's absolutely right. The more young people we get into training and education and work, the less crime we should have on our streets.
Jim Shannon.
Thank the Minister very much for that answer. And Minister, quite clearly, if people have re-offend, they re-offend because they go back to where the peer pressures are, they get back to where the unemployment is, they go back to where the poverty levels are high, and those are things that must be addressed when it comes to sorting out and helping these young people not to re-offend again. Those are big issues, Minister. What can be done to ensure those three things in the locality that they live in don't overtake the problems that they have?
Minister.
He's absolutely right that all these issues contribute to a circumstance which might create offending. But it's really good that we've got the turnaround programme in place, and only 5% of children who completed their turnaround interventions received convictions in their first year of the programme. And that's an example of the sort of programme that we need to be doing to turn young people away from crime.
Question
number 6, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Wherever they are in England and Wales, people should benefit from equal access to legal support and legal aid. Remote technology and provision of online advice present the opportunity to both democratise and deliver legal advice to all who need to access it. We are investing an additional £92 million to support the sustainability of the criminal legal aid sector, and we're consulting on fee increases totalling £20 million for housing and immigration to increase access to civil legal aid. All of this will support legal aid across the country, including rural areas.
Mr. Speaker, North Norfolk is a legal aid desert. My residents have precious little access to family, criminal and housing legal assistance despite the best efforts of local organisations like Norfolk Community Law Service. We face huge barriers to recruitment and retention in rural areas, such as the cost of housing, poor public transport and fees, which despite the uprating are still too low. Things need to change. So would the Minister meet with me and those working in the legal aid sector in North Norfolk to discuss what we can do to support those in need in areas like mine?
I thank him for raising the issue of legal aid deserts, and I welcome the suggestion that he write to me about these things. I regularly meet with legal aid providers and legal support. It's why we're investing an additional £6 million into legal support, which provides that advice, that early advice, which can make a real difference in areas like his.
Jane Kirkham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Cornwall is a big rural legal aid desert. We have many volunteers who would be prepared to help and citizens' advice who would act as an umbrella organisation. Would the Minister meet with me to discuss how we can get some of that access to rural areas legal aid funding into Cornwall?
Minister.
Once again, she is right to raise the importance of early legal support and legal aid. It's why we're investing in online provision. And as I said, the opportunity that remote technology makes in areas like hers can make a real difference. Before I came to this place, I volunteered in a free legal advice centre, and I know just how much of a difference such institutions can make.
Richard.
Question number 7, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This government has committed to halving violence against women and girls in a decade. A broad range of bail conditions can be imposed to protect victims, including electronic monitoring for those who meet the remand threshold, exclusion zones and non-contact orders. Suspects can also be remanded in prison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I raised this issue following a meeting with a constituent whose case raises deep concerns, I think, that are more widely relevant. First, that bail conditions, sometimes weak, sometimes poorly enforced, do not always protect victims of domestic violence from further harassment by their abuser. And second, that despite the increase in the time limit to 2 years under the 2022 regulations, the 6-month limit for prosecutions mean that some cases do time out. Will the Minister meet with me and my constituents to discuss what more can be done to ensure that victims of domestic abuse are fully protected from their abusers?
Well, can I thank the honourable member for raising this important issue from her constituency. We know that more needs to be done in this area. It's why this government has rolled out, started to roll out our domestic abuse protection orders to really help victims of domestic abuse in selected areas. We're seeing how that goes, developing policy in this area to really protect victims and protect women and girls in particular. I'd be more than happy to discuss what more we can do with her and to meet her to discuss it.
Chris Van.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Having spoken to Essex Police and other professionals and worked in for a homeless charity myself, I know often for victims of domestic violence, the hardest part of that is actually making the decision to leave, sometimes the family home. So can I ask what works the Minister has done and with the Department for Homes and Local Government to address this issue?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for raising this. It's a really important issue. Tackling violence against women and girls is not just a Ministry of Justice problem to fix. It is a problem for every government department to fix. That's why I've met with my counterparts across the government departments, including those in MHCLG, to discuss housing needs. We'll be publishing our violence against women and girls strategy later this year, and I look forward to discussing it with him in due course.
Paramount.
Question 9, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to take this opportunity to recognise the excellent work our probation staff do day in, day out. Probation is an indispensable part of the criminal justice system, but the service currently faces significant pressures. That is why we will recruit a further 1,300 probation officers by March 2026, invest £8 million in new technology to reduce administrative tasks for officers, and focus efforts on reducing reoffending.
Muras, and can I take this opportunity to wish you a belated Pasch Glowen, Mr. Speaker. Reoffenders are amongst the most socially excluded in society and often experience complex mental health and social issues, including drug and alcohol addiction. We know that perpetually locking them up does not work and costs a fortune. Can the Minister reassure me that he's working with both the Home Office and the Department for Health and Social Care to ensure that wraparound detox and rehabilitation support is available, such as those offered at Bossense Farm in Cornwall, to be made available?
Minister.
Yes, I can reassure my honourable friend. We work with the Department for Health and the Home Office to get offenders into treatment at the earliest opportunity and have increased the use of drug rehabilitation requirements, as well as improved links to ensure prison leavers stay in treatment on release. In 25-26, the Department of Health is also providing £310 million in additional targeted grants to local authorities, including Cornwall, to improve services.
Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Bob.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As our prisons are running at around 98% capacity, that not only means that existing prisoners are likely to more reoffend, it sadly also means, as we allow more prisoners to be released early, that more prisoners on probation, more people on probation, will reoffend. This not only has a terrible effect on victims, her own department estimates this cost a staggering £18 billion a year in England and Wales. What is the Minister's policy to help reduce reoffending?
Minister.
Well, we've only just taken over a system that was struggling under the weight of 14 years of mismanagement. And we are doing our very best to get on top of it. That's why we've set in train an independent sentencing review, and that's why we're committed to appointing 1,300 new probation officers by this time next year.
Question number 10, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Ministry of Justice officials regularly meet with the Department of Justice in Northern Ireland as part of the Five Nations Forum on Prison Capacity, which allows best practice to be shared and emerging issues to be discussed. The Minister for Prisons in the other place knows the Northern Irish prison system well and will be going there later this year to compare notes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for that. In regard to best practice, the separated prison regime in Northern Ireland gives those who have been committed due to paramilitary activities that special kudos. So actually when they're released, they come out with a status. So can the Minister see the inherent dangers if such a policy was actually applied on a wider scale in dealing with those who may have been radicalised while in prison, so that when they are released they actually bring that into a wider society?
Minister.
The honourable member is absolutely right that we need to learn lessons from wherever those lessons can be learned, and he's right to caution about approaches that may bring about results that people do not wish to see.
Zoe Franklin.
Question number 12, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
This government inherited a record and rising courts backlog. The last Conservative government let down victims of crime, it let down businesses, it let down workers, it let down families, all through its neglect and underinvestment. This government is gripping the crisis. To date, we have funded a record high allocation of 110,000 Crown Court setting days for next year. And we are sitting, and we intend to sit at or at close to maximum in every single jurisdiction. We're fixing your mess.
Zoe Franklin.
I thank the Minister for her answer. I recently met with Rape and Sexual Abuse Support Centre in my constituency of Guildford, and they support hundreds of survivors a year through counselling, advice and carrying out vital prevention work in schools and the wider community. And they explained to me that their work is being undermined by a justice system that is in crisis. Trials are routinely delayed, sometimes for up to 4 years due to a chronic shortage of judges, and as a result some victims are considering dropping their cases, not because they don't want justice, but because they cannot cope with an experience that is so traumatic, which is a gross injustice. Again, I am grateful for your answer, for the Minister's answer, and could the Minister expand specifically on how the Government is going to help prevent re-traumatisation in the court backlog process, and how they will be continuing to support organisations such as RASCAS with funding?
Minister.
We recognise the traumatic impact that the delays in our Crown Court are having on victims of violence against women and girls, and indeed of all crimes. And the best thing that we can do for those victims is to deliver swifter justice. The way we will do that is through not just spending extra money, which we have put in, but also through reform. It's why we've asked Sir Brian Leveson to propose bold and ambitious measures to deliver swifter justice for victims, as she describes.
Chris Wall.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I recently met with two parents in my constituency whose son and daughter-in-law were brutally killed in June 2023. Nearly 2 years on, this case is yet to come to court. It's been delayed 5 times. The date is now set for October. Each time, these delays have caused huge anguish for the family. So will the Minister agree to meet with me on this matter, and can she tell me what steps the Government's taking to ensure trials are conducted promptly and so that justice can be received by families like my constituents?
Minister.
I'm desperately sorry to hear about the case that he describes, and once again, the best thing that we can do for those families to ensure that they get swifter justice and get their day in court within a timely fashion is by bearing down on the Crown Court backlog. It's why we are waiting for Sir Brian Leveson to report in the spring, and it's why we will act promptly on his recommendations.
Foster.
13, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The welfare of the child must be the paramount consideration for the Family Court, which should follow the welfare checklist as set out in the Children's Act 1989. Our new approach to private law proceedings, the Pathfinder pilot courts, focus on problem solving, putting a greater emphasis on the voice of the child, but we are acutely aware that more needs to be done.
Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The previous government's harm panel report stated that there's a crisis in family courts and that they are too pro-parental contact despite there being concerns about the child's safety. Like many things from the previous Conservative government, they did nothing about this report. Will this government and will the Minister commit to reversing the parental presumption in concerns of child abuse?
Minister.
Can I thank the honourable member for that question? As I have stated, the child's welfare must be the court's paramount consideration. The presumption of parental involvement states that a court should presume, unless the contrary is shown, that involvement in a child's life will further the child's welfare. However, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to take this opportunity to state that this only applies if that parent does not put the child at risk of harm. We will publish our review of the presumption in due course.
Rebecca Paul.
Number 14, Mr. Speaker.
Thursday.
Mr. Speaker, the last government left our prisons in crisis. We came within days of running out of space entirely, and the emergency release programme was designed to stop that crisis from happening. Numbers are rising again, and that is why this government is committed to building 14,000 prison places by 2031, compared to the just 500 that the last Conservative government added in 14 years, and reforming sentencing so that we never run out of prison places again.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last month, the Prisons Minister said the longest time an early released prisoner had been left to wander the streets without an electronic tag was 53 days. However, just over a week ago, it was reported that prisoners haven't been tagged for up to 78 days. Please, could the Minister clarify this apparent inconsistency?
We were transparent with the House about the problems with tagging during the second tranche of emergency releases last year. I will make sure that we publish the correct information. I can write to her with the exact figures. But we have been holding Serco to account because their performance on that contract has been unacceptable. We've levied fines and we have said that all options are on the table for any further action we might need to take.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Josh Babrinda.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the dying acts of the last Conservative government was to shake hands with Serco on an electronic tagging contract that Channel 4's dispatches found was completely inadequate. People with serious convictions left without tags for days and weeks. Victims failed, survivors failed, including survivors of people who were released early under the SDS 40 scheme. So what will the Secretary of State do to hold Serco to account for these failures and to clear up the mess that was fundamentally created by the failures of the last government?
I thank the honourable member for his question. He is right that this is one of the many difficult inheritances left for us by the previous Conservative government. The contract to Serco was let by the previous Conservative administration. What I would say to him is that we acknowledge that the performance of Serco has been unacceptable. We have already been closely monitoring, and by closely monitoring I mean day by day monitoring of their performance and their delivery under that contract. We've already imposed fines for poor performance. Some of those issues that related to the SDS 40 emergency releases were ultimately dealt with after close oversight by officials and ministers as well. We continue to monitor that contract very closely indeed. Should further fines or other measures be required, as I've said, all options are on the table.
Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question 15, please.
Minister.
We are introducing new offences for taking intimate images without consent and the installation of equipment with intent to commit these offences. We are also criminalising creating deepfake intimate images without consent, and I proudly co-chair the Violence Against Women and Girls Ministerial Group, which oversees a cross-government approach to tackling Vogue, including online abuse.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for her answer. Sexually explicit deepfakes are a scourge on our society, whether it's young boys in their bedrooms making them of their fellow pupils and teachers, or those who create explicit images of celebrities to order. How will the legislation the government intends to bring forward on this help victims of this disgusting abuse and punish those who perpetrate it?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for that question. This government is committed to halving violence against women and girls over the course of a decade, and that includes this horrendous, degrading, humiliating crime of taking intimate images without consent, but also of creating these deepfake images without consent. It is for far too long these crimes have gone unpunished. Perpetrators have been allowed to carry out this will and cover this their sick behaviour with the rules of banter. We will not stand for it. We are legislating. We are protecting women and girls.
A bit more.
Number 16, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, equality before the law is a cornerstone of our justice system, and my position on this is clear. Later today, this House will be debating legislation to overturn guidelines that the last Conservative government welcomed, and I'm not stopping there. I am now reviewing current policy, and this guidance is being redrafted as we speak. This includes the approach to bail information for courts.
A bit more.
Mr. Speaker, after the conviction of 8 men for a string of horrendous child rape offences in Keighley, I wish I could stand here and say that justice has been fully served, but I cannot, because 2 of these men, dual nationals, absconded during their trial and are still evading justice and are known to be abroad. So does the Secretary of State agree that in cases as serious as this, where dual or foreign nationals are charged with the most grotesque and serious sexual crimes against children, the court should be under a duty to impose stricter bail conditions, including surrendering passports and electronic monitoring, or even no bail conditions provided at all, to stop them fleeing the country and evading justice?
Well, can I say firstly, I share his outrage over the crimes that were committed in his community, and the fact that 2 of those individuals have been able to leave the country and therefore evade the full force of the law and serve their sentence here. He will know that the decision to remand an individual in custody or on bail is solely a matter for the independent judiciary, and courts are already required to consider the likelihood to abscond as part of that decision. More broadly, courts have the power to impose a broad range of robust bail conditions, including the surrender of passports, electronically monitored exclusion zones and curfews. And whilst he knows I cannot comment on the specifics because that is a matter for the independent judge who sat on that case and made that decision, those are the rules that apply, and I'd be happy to discuss that with him further if he wishes.
Question number 17, Mr. Speaker.
We inherited a system in crisis from the previous government, with prisons over 99% full. We took immediate action to prevent the collapse of the prison system by changing the automatic release point for standard determinate sentences. We are building 14,000 new prison places and published our 10-year capacity strategy in December. But we know we can't build our way out of this crisis, which is why we've also launched an independent sentencing review to ensure we will never run out of places again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As ministers will know from previous questions about Park Prison, parents in Newport East have very serious concerns about the welfare of family members there, with worrying reports continuing to emerge in recent months. Can the Minister give an update on any progress being made on prison safety, on mental health support and on drug interception since Park has been receiving targeted support?
Minister.
Safety in prisons is a key priority, and we're working hard to make prisons as safe as possible, and she's right to highlight the concerns at Park. I've recently visited HMP Park myself, as has my honourable friend and the Minister for Prisons in the other place. And I saw on that visit how seriously the Director is taking these issues and engaging closely with families on their very real concerns.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. The catastrophic security failure at HMP Franklin has exposed a danger that terrorist prisoners can pose to prison officers and other inmates right across the prison estate. Will the independent review also examine the culture of gang-related violence and intimidation that has contributed to incidents like this in our prisons?
There's an audit going on of all the reviews and recommendations, but our thoughts remain with our brave prison officers who were attacked, and with the victims of the Manchester Arena bombing and their families, who are understandably concerned by the shocking events in HMP Franklin. And my honourable friend, the Lord Chancellor, took immediate action to set a review in place.
Shadow Minister Jack Rankin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Personal protective equipment is now worn in all kinds of jobs where people may have to deal with dangerous situations. As Professor Akerson has said, it is, and I quote, staggering that frontline police staff working in conditions of far greater peril are not issued with stab vests capable of stopping an attack with a bladed weapon. We should all be ensuring our prison officers come home safe to their loved ones. Unions have called for this, and can I assure the Minister that they have the full support of this side of the House? Will he act, not in 2 months or 6 months, but now, to protect prison officers before it's too late?
This is part of the review that has been announced, and my honourable friend, the Lord Chancellor, is meeting with the POA tomorrow, and these things need to be rightly and properly done, and that's what will happen with this government.
I thank the Minister for his answer, but I would suggest this is something that we should just get on with. It's common sense. There is a more fundamental issue here, I would say, Mr. Speaker, and perhaps I can invite the Minister to provide his assessment of the relative threats provided by different ideological extremists in prisons which may be fueling violence such as this. Islamist terror suspects make up the vast majority of MI5's caseload. Do they also make up the majority of radicalising criminals in our prison estate?
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, he urges us to get on with it. In my reckoning, there's 14 years that the party opposite had time to get on with it. We are getting on with it. We set up Snap Review straight away. It's not party political, he says. Well, people might judge themselves by listening to the sort of questioning we've had today.
Brindle, Liberal Democrats.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Key agents of reform in our prisons are prison officers, and the Unlocked Graduate Scheme was an amazing scheme, is an amazing scheme that supported the production of new prison officers with new innovations. But they have had the rug pulled from underneath their feet beyond their current cohort, with mixed accounts of what has happened coming from different civil servants and other individuals in government. Can the Minister explain exactly what has happened here? Why has this contract not worked? And will he sit down and meet with me and Unlock Graduates to see if we can find a way forward?
I very much praise the work that Unlock Graduates have done over many years. Unfortunately, when this contract was let previously, the Unlock Graduates were unhappy to progress with the contract. So that's the situation. Obviously, these things are very difficult, but I'm very happy to meet with the Honourable Member and discuss matters further.
We now come to Dr. Rupert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Number 18, please.
In prisons, the inheritance was dire. With Crown Court backlogs, the inheritance was dire. And with legal aid services, the inheritance, once again, has been absolutely dire. But this government is rebuilding the legal aid system for those it serves and those who serve in it. That's why in December we announced up to £92 million more a year for criminal legal aid solicitors, on top of £24 million already announced for duty solicitors in police stations. We're also consulting on uplifts, as I said, in housing and immigration legal aid fees worth an additional £20 million a year. That's the first increase in civil legal aid fees since 1996.
Conservatives left legal aid in a mess, like so many other things, so I welcome the sums that she's announcing. But can my honourable friend assure me that that money will reach Ealing, which we've never even had a CAB, not in the 10 years I've been MP, not in the 50 years I've been on this planet, to refer constituents to? So can she assure us that my constituents can get the access to justice they deserve too out of this?
I welcome her question. The Legal Aid Agency keeps contracts under review to ensure that there is provision right across the country, including in Ealing. And as I said earlier, the additional money going into legal support, which includes advice services such as citizens' advice bureaus, law centres and other advice providers, will reach constituents just like hers, both remotely and face-to-face.
We now come to topicals. Gregory Stafford.
Topical number 2, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The House will be aware of the attack at HMP Frankland on the 12th of April. The bravery of the officers involved that day undoubtedly saved lives. My thoughts are with them as they recover. I think also of the victims of the Manchester Arena bombing and their families who are understandably outraged. Since the attack, I have suspended access to kitchens in separation centres and in close supervision centres. Alongside that, an independent review will ascertain how this incident was able to happen, what more must be done to protect prison staff, and more widely, how separation centres are run. The prison service will also conduct a snap review of the use of protective body armour. And in addition, I can today announce that HMPPS will trial the use of tasers in our prisons. Wherever we can strengthen our defences to better protect our staff and the public, we will do so. And now, Mr Speaker, let me turn to the horrific attacks in Nottingham on the 13th of June 2023, which cost Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar and Ian Coates their lives. I pay tribute to their families and the survivors, many of whom are in the public gallery today. The Prime Minister promised we would heed their calls for a public inquiry. I can today announce that a full statutory inquiry will take place. It will be chaired by Her Honour Deborah Taylor, and it will have the power to compel witnesses, and I will place its full terms of reference in the libraries of both houses at the earliest opportunity. Mr Speaker, this inquiry must be thorough in its assessment of the facts and unsparing in its recommendations. That is the very least that we owe to those who have lost so much and fought so hard for this moment. I am sure this House, so often divided, will be united on that at least today.
Gregory Stafford.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I associate myself with the comments made by the Lord Chancellor in sympathy to the families of those who were attacked. In my constituency in Borden, the release of a sex offender to the Hogmore, to property near the Hogmore enclosure, which is frequently used by young people, families and children, has caused consternation in the constituency. So can I ask the Lord Chancellor what she's doing to ensure that those people who have been convicted of sex offences are properly monitored when released into the community, and do national and local agencies have the resources and powers to make sure that these risks are monitored and the public are kept safe?
I thank the honourable member for his question. We do have robust processes in place to make sure, both at a national and a local level, that those offenders can be monitored effectively and that those monitoring mechanisms are as robust as possible. I shall happily look into the case that he raises and ensure he gets a ministerial response.
Adam Joe.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr Speaker. Sorry, I'm still new, clearly. The Conservatives presided over 14 years of total failure in our justice system. Let me be topical. To restore justice in this country and to keep my constituents in Newcastle and Lyme safe, we can't just do more of the same, Mr Speaker. We need more transparency about the time criminals spend in jail, and common sense sentencing must mean exactly that. So how does the Minister think technology can help make that possible?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for that question. I really have to caution members opposite against groaning. I appreciate they might not be proud of their record. I wouldn't be if that was the record I'd left behind after being in government. But I think groaning shows the contempt in which they held the public, who have had to suffer the consequences of a truly dire Conservative Party legacy. My honourable friend is right that technology can, and we hope will, provide better solutions to the management and the supervision of offenders in the community, and I look forward to the sentencing review's findings in this regard.
Sir Secretary of State Robert Jeff.
Can I support my right honourable friend's decision to commission a full statutory inquiry into the terrible attack in Nottingham? I know that will be welcomed by the families, by everyone in the city and across my home county of Nottinghamshire, so I fully support my right honourable friend's welcome decision. Mr Speaker, Greg O'Callaghan is a serving immigration judge who decides asylum and deportation appeals. It took nothing more than a basic Google search to uncover his past comments that the Conservative Party should be treated the same way as Nazis and cancer. As a sitting judge, he's publicly supported Labour's plans to scrap the Rwanda scheme and for illegal entry into the United Kingdom to be decriminalised. Does the Lord Chancellor believe this is compatible with judicial impartiality? And if not, what does she intend to do about it?
Well, firstly, let me thank the Right Honourable gentleman for the remarks he made in relation to the new Nottingham inquiry. I'm very grateful for his support. I'm sure the whole House will want to see that inquiry come to as quick a conclusion as possible. Let me say to him, when people might have complaints to make about judges, there is a it placed a mechanism for them to do so by making a complaint to the Judicial Complaints Office. If he wishes to make a complaint, he can do so. What I'm not going to do is indulge in personal, effectively doxing of judges, not when judges are simply doing their job of applying the law in the cases that appear before them. If there are complaints to be made about judicial conduct, I'm sure the Shadow Lord Chancellor knows how to go about doing it.
Can I just say we have to be careful on what we're doing, and we're not stepping into an area we should be. We're not meant to criticise judges, and this House wouldn't do so. And I'm sure we'd like to change the tone. Roy Chetney.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it is important that judges and the manner in which they are appointed is properly scrutinised in this House, and I won't shy away from that. Mr. Speaker, Helen Pitcher was forced to resign in disgrace as the chair of the Criminal Cases Review Commission after a formal panel found that she'd failed in her duties during one of the worst miscarriages of justice in recent memory. But she's still in charge of judicial appointments, despite judges appearing in the media every week now for their activism. Her commission has failed to conduct the most basic checks on potential judges, either out of sheer incompetence or out of sympathy with their hard-left open borders views. The commission is broken and is bringing the independence of the judiciary into disrepute. How much longer will it take for the Justice Secretary to act and to remove the chair of this commission from her position and defend the independence and reputation of the judiciary?
I'm afraid he can't elide the process for the appointment of judges with a wider attack on the independence of the judiciary. I would hope that he would take the admonishment from the Speaker and the clear approbation of this House to reflect on the way in which he is approaching his role. If there are complaints to be made about judicial conduct, there is already a robust process in place to do so, and if the Shadow Chancellor wants to avail himself of that, I'm sure, given how active he is, he'll be happy to do so. What is completely improper is to take his position in this House to indulge in a wider attack of the judiciary at a time when we know that judicial security has been compromised.
Order, please. It is Topicals with other members to get in. It's a very... Tension's running high. Let's just see if we can calm them down with the integers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On a recent visit to Featherstone Prison near Wolverhampton, I came across a number of recalled prisoners who were there for minor technical breaches of their probation, sometimes for up to a year. Can the Secretary of State please outline what data is collected on the reasons for prison recalls and how that data then informs policy decisions aimed at reducing unnecessary returns to custody?
Minister.
I'm happy to write to my honourable friend on the detail of the data collection and remind him that we've got a sentencing review in process that will be looking at all of these things.
A bit more.
Mr. Speaker, in a single week in Bradford, we've seen council leaders once again reject my calls for a full rape gangs inquiry. An ex-police officer threatened with arrest for investigating these horrific crimes, and now a judge blocking the release of official transcripts from a major rape gang trial in Bradford. So can the Lord Chancellor explain why our justice system is being used to block the truth about these trials?
Well, what I would say to the honourable gentleman is it's not appropriate in these difficult cases to misrepresent what the correct position is. The Home Secretary has already set out in this House and answered questions on our approach to the grooming gangs issue and the local inquiries. And on court transcripts, we are piloting AI technology for accuracy so that we can, in future, we hope, be able to produce transcripts. At the moment, the costs are prohibitive and the accuracy is not there with the technology that is available.
Dan Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Restricted patients are mentally disordered offenders who are detained in hospitals for treatment and who are subject to special controls by the Justice Secretary. So can I ask my right honourable friend, what additional support is the department giving to help mental health trusts to treat, rehabilitate these patients so they can be released from this secure environment in a timely manner?
My honourable friend raises a serious and difficult question. The Mental Health Bill introduced to Parliament last November aims to stop restricted patients from languishing in hospital unnecessarily, whilst prioritising public protection and managing any risk. The Department also works closely with clinicians and care teams to make decisions on restricted patients as quickly as possible in line with the published guidelines.
Julie Lopez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Release on temporary licence is denied for people who say nasty stuff on Twitter, but granted for much more serious crimes. Can the Secretary of State tell me when I can expect a satisfactory reply to an urgent Rossell case, one that I've already raised with the Prisons Minister and senior civil servants, that affects a grieving family in my constituency?
Well, I'll ensure that she gets that response as quickly as possible. I'll chase that up this afternoon. But she will know that release on temporary licence is a mechanism with governor supervision. If you follow the rules in prison, you become eligible. If you don't follow the rules, you are not eligible for release on temporary licence.
The Minister give an assessment of the potential merits of restricting triable either way offences to summary trial except for sentencing.
Minister.
I thank him for his question. At a time when victims are waiting far too long for their day in court, it's right that we look at all options, and we've asked Sir Brian Leveson to consider all options in his review, including the reclassification of some offences to summary only.
Mr. Speaker, we should all be really concerned that the government have quietly abandoned their pledge to hold 5 local inquiries into grooming gangs, because the victims still need justice, the public still need answers, we still need a full inquiry. But in the meantime, can the Minister tell us what specific actions, not just references to AI, her department is taking to ensure full transparency and public confidence in the cases that do come to court?
Well, sentencing remarks are already available for some of those cases. We have a robust judicial system. It can handle difficult cases in front of it. If she's got a concern about transcripts, I've already dealt with that. The cost of full court transcripts is very prohibitive, which is why we're looking at technological solutions, AI in particular. We have a number of pilots running. The thing is to make sure that they are accurate so that the information that's put in the public domain actually reflects what was said and done in the courtroom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Whilst the extra sitting days to reduce court delays announced by the Secretary of State to be welcome, does the Minister agree with me that the state of the court estate also needs some attention, as some courts are out of action due to disrepair issues?
He is absolutely right. I visited the Telford Justice Centre the other day, and one of the courtrooms was out of use because of mould and a leaky roof. This government is investing additional capital investment, an additional £20 million this year in maintaining our buildings and restoring them so that they can be full and active for use. But we're also investing in new court buildings. From Blackpool to the City of London, there are new courts, and they will serve the public well.
Paul Calder.
Mr. Speaker, the passing of Pope Francis was a profound loss. Throughout his life, he was a passionate advocate for a justice system that put reconciliation at its heart. With the publication of the Independent Sentencing Review expected imminently, will the government take this opportunity to move our justice system towards one that, in the words of Pope Francis, contains a horizon of hope and reintegration, and commit to restorative justice being placed at the heart of our justice system?
Well, I think restorative justice clearly does have a role to play, but the principles of our sentencing review are clear. There must always be a prison place available for people who are dangerous and need to be locked up, and we have to do more to help people turn their backs on a life of crime, and I hope that's something that people across this House will agree on.
Colin Naismith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Compared to the same period in 2023, there have been 21% more foreign national offenders removed since July 2024, when this government came into office. So may I congratulate the Lord Chancellor on this achievement and ask what the new funding announced to speed this up will do to increase the numbers being removed.
We've already got off to a good start in terms of the deportation of foreign national offenders from our prisons. The new funding will enable more caseworkers to try and speed up the removal of even more FNOs. I'm very pleased that we've seen a higher number deported this year compared to the previous year when the Conservatives were in office.
Mr. Smart.
Mr. Speaker, a British mother in my constituency faces forced return to Poland to stay with her young children under the Hague Convention on the Civil Aspects of Child Abduction, having fled domestic abuse. With no knowledge of the local language and no source of income there, she risks either dependence on her abuser or homelessness, and this is because the Convention ignores the issue of domestic abuse, allowing it to be manipulated by abusers. Would ministers support my bill, the Hague Abduction Convention Domestic Abuse Bill, that I will present soon, that would change the implementation of the Hague Convention in UK domestic law to protect mothers from the threat of return in this way.
I would happily meet with the honourable member to discuss her bill and to tackle this issue head-on.
Nadia Whittam.
I thank my right honourable friend for the announcement that she's made today, and thank the government for listening to bereaved families and surviving victims. It's only right that the inquiry is statutory to ensure that it has the power to compel witnesses and hold those responsible for failings to account. What assurances can she give that the inquiry conducted will be done in a timely manner, and that the lessons it uncovers will be implemented swiftly to help ensure that similar attacks do not take place again?
I thank my honourable friend for her comments today, and also for her support and for assiduously representing the needs of her constituents. The inquiry is going to be, as I said, chaired by Her Honour Deborah Taylor, who's a very experienced senior retired judge. I have every confidence in her, and she is already going to be meeting the families of the victims and the survivors, and she has undertaken to make sure that the inquiry works at pace and makes its findings as quickly as possible.
Davis.
Can I press the Secretary of State on this issue of transcripts? When I asked for a transcript for a major trial recently, Manchester Crown Court told me it cost me £100,000. When I pressed them, it went down to £9,000, but still way beyond the reach of most people. This is a travesty of justice. Other countries, including some American states, have free transcripts available now. When is she going to sort this out?
Here.
He will know that the issue is, at the moment, transcripts have to be physically transcribed by a human, listening back to what was said and done in court and transcribing it by hand. Previously, speech-to-text transcription has been piloted by the previous government. It wasn't accurate enough. I'm sure he'll agree that any transcripts that are ultimately published have to actually be accurate. It's why we're looking at AI models. We hope to be able to find a model that gives us the requisite level of accuracy and also the speed in order to be able to publish transcripts and to do so cheaply.
Mr. Speaker, children adopted from care or living under special guardianship are currently disproportionately at risk of entering the criminal justice system later in life if early trauma goes untreated. So, given the recent changes in the Adoption and Special Guardianship Fund, what steps is the Secretary of State or the Lord Chancellor taking, rather alongside Cabinet colleagues, to ensure that more equitable access to that kind of support is available?
Minister.
We know how vulnerable many children with care experiences are, and we're working closely with colleagues in the Department for Education to help reduce their risk of entering the criminal justice system. This government is committing £50 million to the Adoption and Special Guardianship Support Fund this year.
Sir Julian.
Will the Secretary of State take a special look at the problem of rogue builders who repeatedly target our constituents, often very vulnerable people, take thousands from them and wreck their homes, and yet the only redress is said to be trading standards? Surely this amounts to fraud, and surely there ought to be a crime and a prosecution to follow.
Minister.
If any crime is committed, or even being alleged to be committed, it should be reported to the police in the first instance. Victims have rights under the Victims Code. We've recently done a campaign to advertise the Victims Code to create awareness of this, and we will soon be consulting on the Victims Code so it reaches all victims of potential crime more broadly.
Chair of the Justice Committee, Andy Slaughter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Lord Chancellor for establishing the inquiry into the Nottingham attacks? But freedom of information requests by the charity 100 Families disclosed last month that at least 392 mental health patients in England committed or were suspected of murder or manslaughter between 2018 and 2023. Those victims included Susan and Geoffrey Farrance, the elderly parents of my constituent. Will the inquiry consider cases like the Farrances so we can learn all lessons necessary to prevent these tragic and avoidable crimes?
Well, I thank the Chair of the Justice Select Committee. He's raised an important issue for his own constituents that also has wider significance. I will be publishing the full terms of reference and placing them in the libraries of both houses very, very soon. But regardless of whether it goes into the specifics of every other type of case, I'm sure that the review will make findings for how these sorts of cases, particularly for people with mental health conditions, are properly managed. And I'm sure that those findings will be be of interest, not just to our department but others, and will be implemented by this government in due course.
Final question, Caroline Bowman.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. We have a case in my constituency of a young offender well below 16 who is causing havoc and has been arrested many times. He's not complying with a court order. And the assumption is against incarceration because of his age. Could the Minister explain what work the government is doing to crack down on prolific offending by young people who are well below 16, who are causing stress and fear in their local communities?
Minister.
I'm very happy to answer queries about that particular issue if she wishes to write to me. But what the government is doing is it's increased the youth offending team budget this year, and it's also continuing to invest in the turnaround programme, which, as I said before, has shown that young people who are engaged in the turnaround programme have only 5% chance of reoffending.
Right, that completes questions. We'll let the front bench change over. Right, let us come to the urgent question. Kevin Hollinrake.
Mr Speaker, thank you for granting this urgent question, which is to ask the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities, Local Government if she will make a statement on the disruption to waste collection and the deployment of the military in Birmingham.
Minister.
Thank you. Before I start, can I first of all start by recognising the significant contribution of Pope Francis on his passing, and also as the Minister for Local Government in England, can I wish everyone a happy St George's Day for tomorrow. Mr Speaker, members across the House will be aware of the continuing disruption caused by industrial action in Birmingham. The Government has repeatedly called for Unite to call off the strikes and accept the fair deal that's on the table. The Commissioners and the Council are undertaking necessary reforms in the context of a challenging financial situation. The legacy of equal pay, where women workers were systematically paid less than their male counterparts for similar roles, and though of course the Council must chart that course themselves, our actions speak to our determination for the welfare of the citizens of Birmingham. We've been providing intensive support to the Council in its efforts to address the backlog of waste that has been building up on the city's streets, and significant progress has been made in the last fortnight. Through a concerted effort, and with the assistance of other councils, private operators, and the endeavour of many hundreds of determined workers who have worked extremely long hours, the result, 26,000 tonnes of excess waste have been removed, and the levels are now approaching normal. More than 100 bin trucks are out every day, and regular bin collections have resumed. The Council continues to monitor the situation closely to ensure that waste does not build up again. This is a government that stands up for working people. The industrial action is in no one's interest, because the deal on the table is a good deal. The Council has worked hard to offer routes to maintain pay through transferring workers to comparable roles, and in some cases to upskill those workers in scope. There may be details to iron out, of course, but that's why talks are so important. But as we made clear repeatedly, Unite should suspend the strike, they should accept the deal, and they should bring this dispute to an end. The Government will continue to be on the side of the people of Birmingham and to support the Council into creating a sustainable, a fair and a reliable waste service that its residents deserve.
Kevin Hollinrake, Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It is astounding that the Secretary of State, having had to resort to calling in the army to cover her blushes for her failure to resolve this situation, was not intending to make an oral statement to the House and had to be dragged before it by means of this urgent question. For she is failing, Mr Speaker, failing to stand up to the unions, failing to protect the residents of the UK's second city, failing to protect the reputation of our nation, and now resorting to being bailed out by our brave armed forces, which I note the Minister did not even mention. It is a national embarrassment, Mr Speaker. Now, I realise the Minister and the Secretary of State were not born until 1980, But many in this House and in the wider country remember the 1970s very well, the winter of discontent. It is clear with this government we risk going back to those days. To prevent that from happening, I offer him and the Secretary of State our support if the Minister will clarify and confirm. What is the projected cost to the taxpayer for the involvement of the military? Will he rule out the humiliation of service personnel ever having to collect refuse? And will he commit to using the provisions of the Minimum Service Level Act to ensure residents receive a basic level of service? To reinstate the legislation that would allow the Council to commission agency workers to clean up the city until the strike is resolved? And finally, to abandon the provisions in the Employment Rights Bill that give unions access to every single workplace in this country, that lower the threshold for union recognition and make it much easier for unions to call strikes. Doing this now, and he will have our support. But if he and she ducks the tough decisions to please her union paymasters, the tail, Mr. Speaker, may once again wag the dog in this country, which could take it back to the 1970s.
Minister.
Yeah. Well, if that's a dog, it's more like a Bichon Frise attack on the government, I'm afraid. It really did not land, because what do people in Birmingham want? In the context of a situation that is not acceptable, where rubbish was accumulating, the people of Birmingham want it to be resolved. And what they have in this government is a government that doesn't play party politics. We don't play councils round in the way that the previous government did. What we do is to work together in partnership for the end that's important. And while they've been carping from the sidelines, they've been doing this for weeks now, they've not had a single solution. But they've had every single criticism, not a single solution. You'd be forgiven to believe you've not been in power for 14 years when Birmingham was sent to the wall. Now, let me just pick up the MOD. Of course, we are appreciative of our colleagues in the MOD for the support that they have offered. And the 3 logistics advisors had made a difference. But they themselves have said that Birmingham is more than capable of making sure that the rounds are collected and the trucks are on the road as of this week, because that mutual support is important. But I need to pull him up on a comment that he made here. When he talks about the humiliation of collecting waste from the streets, the humiliation of decent working class people going out to provide a public service to millions of people across England is not a humiliation. It's a public service. It's one that is critical to our nation's interests. And to say that it's a job of humiliation, I would say that working class people, the bin collectors across this country, take pride in their work and they deserve more respect from the bloody opposition.
Yeah. Chair of the Select Committee, Florence Session-Lomi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I associate myself with the remarks by the Minister on the passing of Pope Francis. May his perfect soul rest in peace. Mr. Speaker, it's important for us to remember the innocent residents who were caught up in this dispute and the fact that they've been suffering for many weeks without that refuse being collected. I think about the many families who had to celebrate Eid and seeing all that rubbish continue to pile up. In just over 4 weeks, there'll be another half term where, again, we'll have many families at home. So it's really important that the government continue to work closely with Birmingham and all parties to make sure this is resolved. The Minister outlined some of the concerns around the funding pressures that councils of all political parties have faced over the last few years. And he will know that he's handed out, and the government have handed out, exceptional financial support for a number of councils who continue to face challenges with their finances. Can the Minister assure the House that in the discussions with Birmingham and others, that will continue to support hard-working local government officers and making sure that their finances are back in a proper and fitter manner way, so that we are not facing situations like what we are seeing happening in Birmingham?
Minister.
Can I thank the Chair of the Select Committee for that question? And in a way, it really hits at the heart of the fragile situation that we inherited as a government, which is after 14 years, Birmingham, and in fact many councils of all political stripes, have been sent to the wall by the previous government. And that was a testament, if you like, to the number of bankruptcy notices that were issued before. Now, what we've been able to do is to stabilise the sector through the recovery grant, the first time ever that the recovery grant was issued, and Birmingham was the largest beneficiary of that. So we have given that city the support that it needs, but of course we want to make sure that the progress that we've seen over the last couple of weeks is maintained. And what I will say, and of course I appreciate completely the unacceptable scenes where waste was being built up on people's streets. It was not okay in normal time, but it certainly was not okay in half term, when children were playing in their local parks and on their streets, which is why we moved quickly to make sure that that waste was removed. And the very fact now that 26,000 tonnes has been removed just shows the dedication of those frontline workers.
Vicky Slade, the Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. May I refer you to my declarations of interest? It's unacceptable that this dispute has dragged into a ninth week, and even more disgraceful that the people of Birmingham are now forced to clean up their own streets. But to those who gave up their Easter holidays to pick up rubbish for their neighbours, thank you. But let's be honest, you should never have had to do it. This goes way beyond Birmingham. It started with an equal pay claim that bankrupted the council, and so with widespread local government reorganisation ahead of us all, what is to stop it from happening again? As councils merge, staff will sit side by side doing the same job but on completely different pay from their colleagues. It's unjust, unsustainable, and it's a ticking time bomb. At BCP Council, where I was leader, 6 years after the reorganisation, pay harmonisation is still going on. We couldn't afford to meet everyone's expectations, and neither can most councils as they teeter on the edge. So what is the Minister doing to stop this from spiralling elsewhere and protecting residents from eye-watering tax hikes or devastating service cuts?
Well, I'm going to be careful not to stray too far from Birmingham, which is not affected by local government reorganisation, but to say that it's completely usual when looking at the transfer of the workforce that negotiations with the workers and trade unions take place to harmonise terms and conditions and pay. And so that will take place in the usual way, and we need to be careful that we don't set hairs running unnecessarily. Now, the issue in Birmingham, in a way the foundational issue, is the issue of equal pay. And for far too long, and this is the heart of the issue, for far too long, women workers were paid far less than their male counterpart for the same comparable roles, and that went on for decades. And what that council has to face, in the way that other councils faced many years earlier, is that has to be resolved. You know, it cannot continue that women are being paid less than their male counterparts, and this, in the end, is about having that harmonisation in the right way.
Bridget Phillipson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And may I thank the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister for his support in addressing the public health concerns in Birmingham. And as he said, 26,000 tonnes of waste has now been cleared and weekly collections will resume. I want to put on record my thanks to everyone involved in the clean-up, including many volunteers. They are the best of Birmingham. Does the Minister agree it is right that the Council resolves equal pay issues, as over 7,000 women are due compensation now, and that is precisely what the deal on offer does, while ensuring that no worker has to lose pay?
And that's precisely the issue here with the worker role that really started the strike action to begin with, that there was an enhanced payment made for that role that did not stand when it went through job evaluation when compared to women who were doing similar roles elsewhere in the council. And that can't stand. And there can be nothing in this agreement, and where there has to be a red line, is that there can be nothing reached by way of an agreement that compromises the council position on equal pay that builds up a liability for the future. But I absolutely pay tribute to the commuter groups and to the frontline workers that have made sure that the response to the clean-up has been one of cooperation.
Mitch.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Will the Minister make a point of thanking the well-run and cost-effective Conservative councils that have either helped or offered to help clear out this terrible mess? And will he bear in mind that it's not just the bin strike which my poor long-suffering constituents in the royal town of Sutton Coldfield have had to suffer. It's also the pending closure of our libraries and the massive hike in council tax. And does he understand why so many of us want to see a proper judge-led inquiry into how bankrupt Birmingham has got Britain's second city into this mess? And will he also bear in mind that this is a dispute between two wings of the Labour Party? And whatever I may think of the council that he leads, it is quite wrong that my constituent, the leader of the council, should have had a photograph of his house put on social media by Unite. And will he condemn that action by Unite?
Well, I mean, I'll be clear, because what I saw over the last few weeks were union officials who were having photographs of their house, and I saw the same trade union using photographs of the council leader's house and the cabinet member's house, and neither of those are okay. This is a fraught dispute already. It requires good faith of all parties, and it requires negotiation and to be in the same room and be able to talk through the issues in the interest of the workers and the people of the City of Birmingham. And our hope and expectation is that whatever has happened, a line is drawn, and that they move forward in good faith.
Sorry, Alan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I refer attention to the Register of Members' Interest. The crisis over bin collections in Birmingham has dragged on for far too long, and my constituents have suffered significantly as a result. Whilst I understand the financial pressures on the council, clearly it is unreasonable to expect any worker to accept a pay cut. Will the Minister commit to taking all steps possible to encourage good faith negotiations between both parties, and that a fair deal can be reached so that this vital service can be restored without any further disruption?
So, I mean, in terms of equal pay, I don't think there's been a single example, although I'm prepared to be corrected, where equal pay hasn't, in all cases, had on the edges winners and losers. That is the element of equal pay that we have to accept in the end. The envelope is not unlimited, and so the books do have to balance. But on the pay, the issue of the worker role and how that's being changed and whether workers need to lose pay or not, the council is offering a sideways move to street scene on the same grade 3, which will mean no loss of income. They're offering workers a move to this, an equivalent grade 3 role. Even if training is required, they will provide that training. And they're also offering an upgrade to LGV driver training, so that currently loaders can upgrade to being a driver, which of course carries a higher payment than their current role.
Thank
you, Mr. Speaker. I recall asking the Minister on a previous occasion about getting support from military personnel, and the Minister at that point said that I'd taken my point from 0 to 100 very quickly. The difficulty with this government is that they've been very slow to react. Now, I was out last week Thursday with a local organisation picking up bin bags with youth workers that had been working 12-hour shifts during the morning and then spending their evening cleaning up the streets. What the Minister's failed to raise in this chamber is that there are thousands and thousands of tonnes of recyclable waste which is not being collected, encouraging further fly tipping. Yeah. So when will this government intervene, resolve the issue? The bin workers work hard, and there's up to 200 which will lose up to £8,000, and that needs to be resolved.
Well, I mean, I share his appreciation of community volunteers who are cleaning up the streets, as much as I welcome the hard work of hundreds of frontline council workers who have stepped in to make sure that the accumulated waste can be clear, and their efforts have meant that 26,000 tonnes of accumulated waste has now been cleared. And so we can share that at least. But on the question of when the government is appropriate to come in and offer support, well, that's when the major incident is called. And from that moment, he will know that I've been in Birmingham every week since then, that there have been daily update calls taking place with the council, and we've been providing central support to the council to clear up the city.
Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Minister for the efforts that he has made to keep Birmingham MPs informed on a cross-party basis during this dispute. I would also like to associate myself with the condemnations made in this place of the publication of photographs of the houses of some of the parties who are members of the dispute. My residents in Birmingham Northfield want to see a service that is not the same as before the strike. It must be better, and I hope that the Minister, I know, shares that ambition. But given we've heard today about the 1970s, it is not so long ago that a Conservative Secretary of State stood at this dispatch box and said that he was delighted to announce 12% cuts for Birmingham's budget, the sharpest of any unitary authority. Does he agree that the one word missing from the Shadow Secretary of State's question was sorry?
Well, I mean, we've been here repeatedly, really, questions and statements, and even oral questions that have been asked in the House, and not on a single occasion has the Shadow Secretary of State or even Shadow Ministers accepted their role in government for 14 years that have driven councils of all colours to the wall. We need to bear in mind that commissioners were brought in under the previous government, that Birmingham had to declare bankruptcy under the previous government. The only difference now is that they have a government on side willing to meet them financially, and that's why the recovery grant was so important, but also to meet them in spirit and through our actions, which is why we're working in partnership to clean up the streets and to get Birmingham clean.
Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Which legacy is the Minister most proud of? Rubbish and rats in Birmingham, or Labour's breach of its promise to the electorate to freeze council tax?
Yeah. I'm sure that sounded a better question when it was being drafted this morning. But in terms of the substance, I don't think anyone takes pride in the strike action and the waste that was accumulated on the street. This is a very serious issue. It's not acceptable at all that a major incident had to be called and that the public health concerns were as prevalent as they were, which is why we took quick action. It's why the streets have been cleaned to the tune of 26,000 tonnes. It's why there are more daily collections taking place now in terms of tonnage than there were in routine time, to make sure that they catch up and don't slip back. But we recognise, of course, that in the end, the only solution to this is to deal with the underlying strike action that is causing that disruption.
John MacDonald.
I refer to my register of interest. I'm a member of Unite. In fact, I'm very proud of it. I think there's 4 generations of my family that have been. Can I say to the Minister that not to rise to the provocations opposite? There's a difference between having 3 military advisers than having troops on the streets, which would be seen as an act of provocation and worsening the situation. Can I suggest to him instead that either the Secretary of State or he now convene the meetings between the Council and the Union to secure progress in the negotiations?
Well, of course, in terms of communication, there has been almost daily communication with the Council. The trade unions, of course, have made representations too. But we do need to be really clear here about appropriate roles and responsibilities and where lines of accountability are. The government is not the employer of the workforce in Birmingham. The Council is the employer of the workforce in Birmingham. And it's for the employer and the employees to reach an agreement that both can accept. Of course, we urge both parties to negotiate in good faith. We believe that the deal on the table is a good deal. And I think it's correct to say, of course, workers have the right to make their representations known. In the end, though, the Council has to take into account all of its workforce, including over 7,000 women who historically were paid far less for equivalent roles than their male counterparts. And that's a foundational issue at the heart of this.
Mr. Speaker, despite assurances from the dispatch box before the Easter recess, we continue to see piles of rubbish on the streets in Birmingham. We continue to see the costs mounting, and the rats, the squeaky blinders, do continue to roam freely in the streets of Britain's second city. So I'd like to ask the Minister again, what is his government and the Labour-run Birmingham City Council doing to bring an end to the strike? Because enough is enough. Residents want to see an end to this.
So there's still work taking place. I mean, in terms of, I should address actually the issue of rodents, because that is a serious issue. Nobody wants to see rats around the street, particularly around the accumulated waste that was taking place. Which is why we welcome the Council's decision to suspend the call-out for pest control to make sure that households, when they do report rodents, aren't disadvantaged or have to have the financial impact of that. So we welcome that move in terms of the substance of the question. In terms of the response to this, we say from day one that the accumulated waste was not acceptable and it was a public health hazard, which is why the government stepped in to support the council to make sure that we could get more trucks out of the depot, that the amount of waste being collected could increase, and the amount of routine collections could be regularised. And I'm pleased to say that progress has been made. But of course, the thing that will ultimately resolve this is for the trade unions and the council to reach an agreement that brings the strike action to an end.
On promotion of Leeds United, Richard Berman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I take that as a congratulation from the Speaker of the House of Commons at the promotion of Leeds United, so thank you very much. That's the most popular thing I've said in here for some time, which is saying something. I'm a Unite member, a trade union member, proud to be so. I remember the 2009 Leeds bin strike when the Conservative and Lib Dem run council tried to cut the bin workers' pay by £9,000, by up to £6,000, sorry. A 3-month strike followed, which was ultimately successful. I just want to raise the general point with the Minister when I hear much of what's been said in the Chamber. It's always wrong to castigate trade unions, an important part of our civil democracy, as the enemy within. And when we're talking about the Unite the Union and the strike, or any strike, it's not union officials that call the strike, it's trade union members. So Unite the Union means the bin workers. And it's really important that we don't allow trade unions and trade unionism to be demonised in relation to this dispute or any other.
I mean, what we can certainly agree on is that people, of course, have the right to strike, but people also have the right to go to work. And what we saw were the restriction of the number of bin trucks that could leave the depot. That had a significant impact on the amount of waste that could be collected. And the direct result of that was the accumulation of tens of thousands of waste on the street. What we really want, in the end, is for Unite, as the negotiating body of the workforce that it represents, and Birmingham City Council as the employer, to get around the table on the deal that has been tabled and to iron out the differences, if there are differences, to reach an agreement. And in the meantime, if that's going to take longer, we strongly encourage Unite to suspend strike actions during those negotiations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Birmingham City Council is the largest authority, local authority in the UK by population, and for sadly many years it has been struggling with very severe problems that have been impacting on its residents. The government has engaged in local government reorganisation over much of the country. There's large parts of Birmingham City Council would maybe be better administered elsewhere out of the current city of Birmingham boundaries. Would the Minister look at actually whether it's time to review the boundaries of Birmingham City Council to see if it's just got to the stage where it's so large that it cannot function properly for its residents?
Well, I don't think anyone could criticise my work ethic, but I think reorganising a third of England and 20 million residents being affected is quite a reorganisation to deliver, and we should focus on that. There is no intention, as it stands, to reorganise Birmingham, but there is absolutely an intention to resolve the underlying trade union dispute that's taking place, to get people back to work, and to reach an agreement that is acceptable.
Sir Bernard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I just point out that this strike did start under this Labour government, under a Labour council, and continues, despite all his hand-wringing and anguish, under a Labour government, under a Labour council, and it really is futile for the government to try and pretend it's all somebody else's fault, least of all the previous government. And can he avoid also misrepresenting what my right honourable friend said? He made a perfectly reasonable suggestion that he should reinstate the legislation that would allow agency workers to be brought in to pick up the rubbish off Birmingham streets. Why won't he do that? Because he's pussyfooting around, kowtowing to his Labour paymasters, the trade unions.
Well, I mean, that's certainly the award for the silliest question yet. There is no kowtowing, there is no bowing. We played this with an absolutely straight bat in the interest of the people of Birmingham, in the way that the people of Birmingham would expect. When it comes to the issue of agency workers, our judgment is that that isn't required, because the mutual aid that's been brought in from neighbouring councils and housing associations and the redeployment of frontline staff from elsewhere in the council has dealt with the accumulated waste that has been developing over that period, and we've now seen that 26,000 tonnes of waste cleared. And as I said before, now that trucks are leaving the depot as usual in most cases, there are now more collections taking place in terms of tonnage a day than in regular time. So the council is on top of that, and there isn't the need, in the way that he speaks to bring in additional agency staff above and beyond.
Sir Judy Lewis.
Given that the Minister no doubt sincerely believes that the offer on the table is a good one, why does he think the unions are not accepting it?
Well, I mean, it's clear through the negotiations that there are a number of moving parts, and I should also be clear that we are not replicating those negotiations in this chamber. those negotiations should take place between the employer and the employees and the trade unions, and we shouldn't be trying to circumnavigate that here. But our belief is it's an agreement that strikes the right balance between giving support to the workers in scope who are affected, so the worko roles that are in scope, but not undermining the equal pay work that's been done, that for far too long has seen women underpaid for the work that they've been doing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister failed to answer my honourable friend's question on whether troops would be used to clear up the mess. Would he now do so? And with the Defence Secretary sitting next to him, who will know very well that a trained soldier's salary starts at around £25,000, will he say that in the event that troops are used, that they will also receive, as part of the MACA arrangements, arduous duty payments?
Well, as I said before, and I do think I've covered this at least a couple of times in the contribution, we are grateful to our colleagues in the MOD for the logistical support that they have provided. It was 3 members of staff on logistical planning, and they've had a significant impact, and the Council are grateful to that, and we are grateful to that. What there isn't a requirement for are for troops to be deployed on the street to collect waste, because the Council is getting on top of it. Now, we don't take that for granted, and we don't want any disruption to that. But to be clear, the military are not needed on the streets of Birmingham. The Council have it in hand, and workers are doing that work today.
Good job.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Genuine question to the Minister. I am a little bit confused as to what these 3 supermen and women from the MOD or the military have done, because one of the principles of mutual aid, military aid to the civil authority, is that the people you're helping have not to have the capacity themselves, and it's unreasonable to expect them to grow it in a timely manner. So what have they done that Birmingham City Council couldn't do themselves?
I'm usually a bit suspicious when somebody starts off the question with this is a genuine question, but actually that was a proper question. Members could learn from that. In terms of the underlying question as to the added value that the MOD, okay, calm down. The added value the MOD were able to provide were essentially any council has an organised routine and rotas for getting the bins collected in a given place. In Birmingham's situation, where they had mutual aid offers from other councils, they had to work out how best to supply quite different offers of support in terms of trucks and available workers across the city in a different way. So the logistical workers from the MOD were supporting the creation of those new collection rounds as part of the response to clearly accumulated waste.
David Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the Minister, or the Pied Piper as he's quickly becoming known as, clear up the record, please? In his opening statement, he said that the military offered their support to come and clear up this mess. Did they offer, or were they ordered by his department to come and support because his government can't stand up to the unions?
So to answer I've covered already the value that the MOD have provided, and of course we work in partnership on that. The offer of support was made, it was given to the Council. They have received that gratefully, but the MOD have also been very clear with the logistical planners they've had who have been on the ground in Birmingham, that the Council is at the point now where it doesn't need the support from those logistical planners because it has the collection rounds in place, which I hope he would welcome.
Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I refer members to my register of interest. Just 8 weeks ago, the Minister for Local Government told me on the Select Committee there is a lot of good work taking place in Birmingham. The government wants to create super councils covering 500,000 people over vast areas to manage bin collections and other vital services, against the wishes of my constituents in Broxbourne. We've seen the result of this in Birmingham. So does the Minister believe that tons of rubbish on the streets is the model the rest of the country should follow?
But in a way, that shows the misunderstanding of why Birmingham is in the situation it is. It makes no more sense to say that Birmingham's problems are because of its size and scale than it would to say, well, look at the debt liabilities that are built up by some of the smallest councils in the country and the way that they've been borrowing many hundreds or thousands of times their revenue. These are, in a way, down to long-term issues. Some of it is the foundational funding that that council has been given in Birmingham. But in the end, Birmingham is getting its house in order. It's not an easy process, and they would say themselves they've got a way to go. But when it comes to resolving the historic equal pay liabilities, when it comes to resolving the Oracle IT system, there's a significant financial liability to the Council. When it comes to modernising its workforce and that future operating model, the Council is making progress, but it's got some way to go.
That now allows us to come to Jim Shannon.
Can I thank the Minister very much for his answers to those very difficult questions. The Minister will understand and know, of course, the absolute necessity of military intervention in civil life in Northern Ireland over a great many years. Whilst it is never an easy option, does the Minister not agree that if it is the only option, if a pay deal can be reached to ensure that disease does not spread through the city, that action has to be taken before the ill and the vulnerable pay the price of the standoff?
Well, I mean, as it stands, the situation for most streets at most times has returned to normal service. The accumulated waste that was building up, that was not acceptable at all, has been removed, and there's 26,000 tonnes of that has been removed. In most places, at most times, the routine collections of the bins are taking place as normal, and over 100 trucks a day are leaving the depots as usual. And so we hope that we don't return to the scenes that he talks about for the very reasons that he expresses. It's not acceptable from a public health point of view, and it has consequences.
That completes the urgent question. Let the front bench change over. The Defence Secretary's statement. Secretary of State, John Healey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, HMS Prince of Wales set sail from Portsmouth, and I trust the whole House will join me in wishing the entire carrier strike group a safe and successful global deployment. Mr. Speaker, I wish to make a statement on the ongoing war in Ukraine. Today, Parliament returns from our Easter break, but during the last 2 weeks, Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine has continued. Drone strikes, missile attacks, fierce fighting on the front line. On Palm Sunday, men, women and children in Sumy, on their way to church, were hit by Putin's deadliest attack on Ukrainian civilians so far this year, killing 35 people, including young children, and injuring over 100 more. We're united in condemnation of this brutal attack and of Putin's illegal actions. At this critical moment for Ukraine and for European security, we have stepped up the government's efforts for Ukraine, and we will step up further, both to increase military support for the fight today and to secure peace for tomorrow. Mr. Speaker, we cannot jeopardise the peace by forgetting about the war. So 10 days ago in Brussels, the UK convened and I co-chaired the 27th meeting of the Ukraine Defence Contact Group, alongside my good friend, the German Defence Minister, Boris Pistorius. 51 nations and partners from Europe, from the Indo-Pacific, from South America, came together at NATO headquarters, with the Ukrainian President Zelensky, the US Defence Secretary Hegseth, and the NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte. We came together to step up support for Ukraine in the fight. Together we pledged a record 21 billion euros of military support to put Ukraine in the strongest possible position and to increase pressure on Putin to negotiate. Mr. Speaker, this year the UK is providing £4.5 billion of military support to Ukraine, more than ever before. And in Brussels, I announced 200 million of this support will be surged to the front line, with supplies starting to reach Ukraine's fighters within this month, including radar systems, anti-tank mines, and hundreds of thousands of drones. I also announced £160 million worth to help repair and maintenance of essential battlefield vehicles and equipment. This support will strengthen Ukrainian troops in the close fight now. It will also strengthen our industrial links with Ukraine and boost UK businesses. When President Trump talks about peace through strength, it is the commitments made through the Ukraine Contact Group that provide the strength to secure that peace. And despite President Putin's promise of a 30-hour pause in fighting, I can confirm that Defence Intelligence have found, and I quote, no indication that a ceasefire on the front line was observed over the Easter period. And 10,000 missiles and drones have been fired into Ukraine during this year alone, including from the Black Sea. So while Putin has said he declared an Easter truce, he broke it. While Putin says he wants peace, he's rejected a full ceasefire. And while Putin says he wants to put an end to the fighting, he continues to play for time in the negotiations. And the military, the Russian military, continue to pressure Ukraine on a number of fronts. Mr. Speaker, I can confirm Russian military progress is slowing. Putin gained less territory in March than he did in February, less territory in February than he did in January. Ukrainian towns, which Russia has been targeting since before Christmas, have still not been captured. Ukrainian troops have still not been ejected from Russian territory in Kursk. Whatever ground Putin is taking comes at a huge human cost. Over 940,000 Russians have likely been killed or injured in the war so far, including 150,000 killed or injured this year alone. Last month, the average daily casualty rate on the Russian side was 1,300, almost double the rate of this time last year. While at home, Putin faces crippling interest rates at 21%, inflation running at over 10%, and the Russian government spending nearly 40% of its entire budget on this military campaign. I have to say, Mr. Speaker, in the days ahead, it is, however, likely that Russia will keep up attacks on the Sumy Oblast to help it reclaim nearby contested areas of Kursk. In central Donetsk Oblast, Russia is targeting urban strongholds such as Toretsk, Pavlovsk and Chaziv Yar. And in Kharkiv, Russia is continuing to make assaults towards the rail and logistics hub of Kupiansk. We do expect more ground to be taken, more Russian missiles to be fired into Ukraine. And that is why we must remain united for Ukraine, across this House, across this country, and across those nations standing alongside Ukraine. And we must step up support for Ukraine and pressure on Putin to force him to recognise that now is the time for peace, and continuing the war will prove much worse in the long run for Russia. Mr. Speaker, we believe peace is possible, and we must be ready for when that peace comes. So along with the vital military aid, the UK government continues this push for peace. The Foreign Secretary joined ceasefire discussions with the US, France and Germany and Ukraine in Paris last week, and in Brussels 10 days ago, along with my good friend the French Minister Sébastien Lecornu, I also convened and co-chaired the first Defence Ministers meeting of the Coalition of the Willing. 30 countries coming together to build on the hard work of over 200 military planners from Europe and beyond. That operational planning must remain classified, but I can assure the House these plans are real, they're substantial, they're well developed. Our reassurance force will have clear objectives for Ukraine. First, to secure safe skies. Second, to secure safe seas. Third, to support peace on the land. And fourth, to support the Ukrainian armed forces to become their own strongest possible deterrent against future Russian attacks. And in the days ahead, this detailed planning continues domain by domain, and nations will continue to provide firm commitments for this coalition. I will be also meeting tomorrow the Ukrainian Defence Minister Umerov and other allies as the government brings together the US, the UK and European ministers and national defence security advisors to discuss next steps, including what a ceasefire might look like and how to secure peace in the long term. Mr. Speaker, this war was never just about the fate of one nation. It's about not allowing national borders to be redrawn by force. It's about preventing aggressors across the world from being emboldened to threaten the security of all nations. And that's why the defence of the UK starts in Ukraine. It's why UK leadership is playing a unique role to put Ukraine in the strongest possible position on the battlefield and in negotiations. And also to prepare building blocks for a lasting peace that will safeguard Ukraine's sovereignty and deter Putin from future aggression. Mr. Speaker, I hope this House today will join in sending a signal to President Putin and in saying to Ukraine, we will stand with you in the fight and we will stand with you in the peace, whenever that may come.
Under Secretary of State James Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I associate the opposition with the Secretary of State in wishing a good and successful mission to the crew of HMS Prince of Wales as it sets sail on its latest trip. And I'm grateful to the Secretary of State both for the advanced side of his statement and, as we did when we were in opposition, the support provided by his department for my recent visit to Ukraine. Indeed, it was a privilege to pay tribute to the victims of this terrible war at the Wall of Memory in Kyiv, but also a powerful reminder of the stark contrast between the reality on the ground of continued casualties and the lies and propaganda from the Kremlin in terms of any so-called ceasefire. It must be clear that to Putin, a ceasefire is simply part of a game, one that he has no intention of pausing, and we must continue to stand with all our allies in being 100% clear on who the aggressor is in this war. Those who pay the price for Putin's game are innocent civilians, such as those killed in the terrible strike on Sumy on Palm Sunday. Is the Secretary of State able to shed any light on reports that Russian forces used a cluster munition as part of this attack on civilians? And if so, would this not illustrate the extraordinary contrast between claims of ceasefires on the one hand and the reality of continued Russian indiscriminate bombing? In the face of such aggression, we remain proud of the extraordinary role the United Kingdom has played in backing Ukraine's struggle under successive governments, and I welcome the continued support announced at the new DCG. Turning to Secretary of State's latest update on the coalition of the willing. Whilst we will always stand with the government in supporting Ukraine, he knows that it would be a major shift to go from indirect provision of munitions to boots on the ground. Therefore, as the opposition, we are duty-bound to probe what remains several unanswered but very significant practical questions that any such deployment would entail. A month ago, on the 22nd of March, I wrote to the Secretary of State with a series of questions on the coalition of the willing. I have yet to receive a reply. So given the importance of those questions, I ask him them now. First, what progress has he made on securing a US military backstop? Secondly, what would be the expected rules of engagement? Thirdly, how many nations have definitively committed to sending troops? And fourthly, will he consider derogating from the ECHR for any deployment, given our military's previous experience of vexatious lawsuits arising from overseas operations? Of course, an extraordinary aspect of the coalition of the willing is that we are meant to be leading with France, whilst at the same time, behind our back, they are seeking to undermine our fishing rights in our own sovereign waters over access to a European defence fund that will definitively include non-EU nations. Now, when I pointed this out to orals last month, the Secretary of State asked me to drop the Brexit rhetoric. Yet over Easter recess, it was he who blasted the EU's Foreign Affairs Chief, Kaja Kallas, when she suggested that his plan for troops in Ukraine was unclear. So what is clear? Almost alone, we stood by Ukraine from the very beginning of the war, helping them avoid an early capitulation that would have been a disaster for the whole of Europe. We also offer our nuclear deterrent to European NATO 24/7, not to get better fishing rights, but to defend the freedom of European nations. A country that does all this should not be excluded from a defence fund that will include non-EU states and should not face punitive measures against its fishing fleet when we are meant to be doing everything possible to strengthen European defence solidarity. The Secretary of State needs to understand this is not about Brexit, this is not about Britain or France, this is about the security of the whole of Europe.
Does he understand that? And can he confirm categorically that the government will not offer any concessions on fishing rights in order to secure an EU defence pact? Finally, Mr. Speaker, turning to procurement for our own armed forces, both in Kyiv and this morning with cross-party colleagues in Parliament, I had the pleasure to meet Ukrainian manufacturers of drones that have been highly effective on the front line. So can I ask if the Secretary of State will support such companies in partnering with British companies to set up operations in the UK, both to boost Ukraine and give our military rapid access to proven capabilities? And given how much of this rests on the SDR, will it be published this month?
Mr. Speaker, I'm glad the honourable gentleman has been to Ukraine recently. I'm glad we were able to facilitate that visit. I'm proud of the number of members of this House from all sides that are regularly going to Ukraine. It has a big impact on Ukrainian population that don't necessarily hear our debates in the UK, but when they see British parliamentarians from all sides, and yourself, Mr. Speaker, as the Speaker of this House in Ukraine, they know that this is a country that stands united and stands with them. The honourable gentleman is completely right to draw what he calls the contrast between Putin's claims of a ceasefire and the reality of continued brutal attacks, including on civilian population in Ukraine. Mr. Speaker, he asks about the potential situation of a negotiated peace in which we, alongside 30 other nations, as part of the coalition of the willing, are considering how best we can help secure that as a lasting peace, which is what President Trump has promised to deliver. He will have heard the Prime Minister say, we are, if necessary, fully committed to putting British troops on the ground if necessary. And we do that because the security of the UK starts in Ukraine. He asked about the US. And both I and the Prime Minister in our discussions with the US have been clear that Ukraine, post a negotiated ceasefire and peace, will need long-term security assurances, and that there is a role for the US to play in those. On the ECHR, look, it's long-standing practice, Mr. Speaker, as the honourable gentleman knows better than anyone, of successive governments, that the UK deployments, home and abroad, will always comply with international law. That's what sets us apart from nations like Putin's Russia. And I'm not going to be drawn into any of the operational deployment and what that may look like, because the only person who benefits from that, Mr. Speaker, is President Putin. Two other things he raised with me. The High Representative for the EU, Kaja Kallas, and the question of a European Union UK defence agreement and access to the sort of EU programmes that they are stepping up and putting in place. He quite rightly says, we have a part to play, we have a contribution to make, and let me reflect what Kaja Kallas herself has said. She says, I think the UK is a very important defence and security partner. It is the most logical defence and security partner that we have, and it is a beneficial relationship to both sides. It's why she and we are committed to negotiating a defence and security agreement. And finally, on the question of drones, he is right to point to the significance of drones in this current battle. It is now the fact that more casualties on both sides are caused by drones than artillery. And in terms of the UK-Ukrainian link, we have helped manufacture, supply in this country and in Ukraine over 14,000 drones since July in the last election. This is central to the Ukrainian defence strategy. It's central to the future of our own forces, and it's central to... And the SDR, Mr. Speaker, we've said many times, it's close to completion, it's being finalised, and it will be published in the spring.
To the Select Committee, Tamanji Singh Desi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. While it was saddening to hear about the continued colossal death and destruction in Ukraine, I welcome the Secretary of State's statement and indeed his leadership of the Ukraine Defence Contact Group, which by pledging a record €21 billion has demonstrated that the 51 allies are firmly committed to helping our Ukrainian friends in their hour of need. The Secretary of State also alluded to the many shorter ceasefires that were agreed and then broken. And that the question we need to ask ourselves is, when President Putin says he wants a ceasefire, is that actually the case? But Secretary of State, if a much-needed ceasefire is agreed, how confident is he of convening and then keeping the coalition of the willing together?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for his contribution and the job he does chairing the Defence Select Committee. One of the trickiest tasks about the work that has been undertaken by our military planners is that it is not clear what circumstances any forces may be required to be deployed, and it is not clear the details of the negotiated peace deal that we all want to see will be in place. So he asked me the straight question. Actually, when the deal is done, when the peace is negotiated, the ceasefire is in place, I believe it will be easier, not harder, to hold together and enlarge the number of nations willing to be a part of the coalition of the willing. And in the meeting that I chaired at NATO headquarters 10 days ago, the first ever defence ministers of the coalition of the willing, there were 30 nations round the table there, all participating in the detailed operational military planning that is continuing. 30 nations, not just in Europe, but beyond as well.
Your General Spokesperson, Helen Maguire.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I also thank the Defence Secretary for the advanced sight of his statement. We welcome the £200 million of support for the front line to support Ukraine. Over Easter, Putin proved that he had no interest in securing peace. Within hours of declaring a supposed Easter truce, Putin unleashed a fresh wave of drone and artillery attacks across many parts of the front line. Meanwhile, President Trump has shown once again his utter indifference towards the Ukrainian people's struggle. After boasting that he would end the war within 24 hours of taking office, he now threatens to withdraw US support from mediating talks altogether. It's no wonder his efforts have failed, given his warped approach of applying pressure to Kyiv while offering the hand of friendship to the Kremlin. We cannot rely on President Trump if we want to secure a just peace in Ukraine, one which respects Ukraine's right to self-determination and proves that aggression towards neighbours does not pay. That's why the UK needs to go further and faster, together with our partners in Europe and the Commonwealth, to support Ukraine and increase the pressure on Putin. Will the Defence Secretary update the House on what steps have been taken to seize the £25 billion worth of frozen Russian assets across the UK and to deploy these to Ukraine? Will he also update the House on whether the government plans to expand the UK's designation of vessels which are part of Russia's shadow fleet and subject to sanctions, helping to further reduce Putin's ability to fund his war through exported oil revenues? We've welcomed the government's work to convene discussions on creating a reassurance force for Ukraine. The credibility of the UK's commitment to such a force would be significantly enhanced by reversing the staggeringly irresponsible 10,000 troop cuts to our army, which the Conservatives undertook while in government. Will he commit to reversing these cuts today?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I welcome her welcome for the surge in UK support to the Ukrainian troops on the front line. It's important to really support them at this point in their close fight, and that's what we're determined to do, as well as preparing for the longer-term peace that we hope will be secured. And I just would say to her, on that question of the peace negotiations, really it is President Trump that has created this opportunity for those negotiations and for that peace. And it really is too soon to call failure on those negotiations. Everything about the determination of some of the significant US figures and the work that they're doing, the discussions that we will help support and play a part of in London tomorrow, demonstrate that there is a broad coalition of nations wanting to see a peace in Ukraine, wanting to see Putin negotiate seriously, and willing to take the steps to help bring that about. And on the question of pressures on Putin,